Well, welcome to Uncut and Unfiltered Cosmetology Insights with Nathan Shaw, where we help aspiring and current beauty professionals master the business and craft of cosmetology so that they can build successful, long lasting careers. Your guide is Nathan Shaw, a dedicated educator and working man's hairdresser who successfully built his schools from his earnings behind the chair. He generously shares his deep industry experience to challenge misconceptions and teach you the crucial skills you need to manage your career. I'm your host, Andy Traub, and today we're going to be talking about three things that make Nathan's schools unique and the right fit for you or anyone who wants to make a great investment in their education and in their development as they start their cosmetology career. So, Nathan, thank you as always for joining us.
Likewise, thank you for having me, Andy.
Let's talk about the first thing that makes your school unique. And I want to actually begin with the instructors. Every great team has a great coach, right? Every great family's got to have, the right parents, leading the way. Every company has to have the right, managers, if you will, and president. So within a school, teachers are so vitally important. As the founder of the schools, what are you looking for when you're looking for and hiring teachers, instructors?
So one of our biggest criteria is really just finding someone in the industry that has that, we want to call it the teacher's heart or whatever, but it's someone that loves mentoring, that, we get a job and we work because we need a paycheck. We all have to, we all have bills to pay and a living to make, but there's got to be something else that fills our cup from work to really make it satisfying. And that's what we're looking for, is those instructors that get satisfaction helping students find those aha moments or grasp concepts, hone their skills and techniques. And when they see that light bulb comes on, that's for any, I think, good instructor, that's the thing that fills their cup. And that's kind of what we look for.
How important is it that they have, 40 years of experience? Or is it sometimes better if they aren't in the business as long because they're in the business more like they're newer, so they've got kind of fresher ideas and fresher perspectives? How important is it that they're in there for a long time or a short time?
So I really love the fact that we have a little bit of both. And the reason being is someone that's been at it a long time, which I myself have now, right? I have a ton of years of experience and I have a lot of knowledge, and some of it's based on things that I learned 20 years ago, right? And
Mhm.
those things stayed static, but my perspective of how I learned it compared to someone who learned it more recently, and maybe even the way in which they learned it, is going to be drastically different. And so the fact they can get kind of different viewpoints, I think, super important, because we found we call format teaching is how we teach. We found that there's kind of four different ways people learn, and we try to make sure that we hit on all of those. And everybody's got a different learning style, and they're all going to be able to relate a little differently to their instructors. So we try to have.
That's so encouraging because I just think about as a parent of three kids who learn in very different ways that, one of the reasons I think a lot of people just don't want to go to quote unquote normal college. It's just college has not changed that much in forever, right? And so for those who are listening or watching, your opportunity to be a part of something where you can truly be hands-on is that's generally why most people are going to cosmetology school. They literally want to get their hands dirty, right?
Exactly.
Um, let's talk more about the instructors. We're trying to create a contrast here, obviously. So, I mean, are there instructors who just are they're not like looking at new trends? They just sort of read whatever's in the book. I mean, I think we've all had great teachers and bad teachers. What is something that someone should look out for if they visit a school and they're like, "Uh-oh, this teacher doesn't seem that in tune with either trends or, they're not that interested in me as a person."
I think you kind of nailed it on the head, especially that last statement. They're not interested in me as a person. The trends is important as well, but I think when you're touring a school or checking out a school, if you should try to have some interactions with the instructors, try to meet the educators, see what they're, how engaged are they? Are they actively teaching? Do they seem like they're really there for the students? And that's going to be a tell of like how involved they're going to be. And I think also how much work they're going to put into making sure that you succeed.
So I think about the good teachers that I've had, and I really actually think about my very favorite teachers. they were not easy. And so I wonder if you could speak to that of how do you make sure you hire teachers and instructors who are going to do the best for the students, which means it's not going to be easy.
That's something that we work on, I'd say constantly, right? As a school group, we have quarterly staff trainings. We have staff meetings as well, usually biweekly, and we'll talk about like how to reach students that are maybe struggling, and and more importantly, like I said, with that format teaching, we want to make sure that like whether it's the book work or whether it's the hands-on skills, it's not just like play a video, hand them a book, tell them to read it, and we'll take a test, right? Or watch the video. It's like getting in there with them and showing them, I that's one of the things I've done a lot. Like the way I'll foil hair, if I'm putting hair in a foil, for example, I use a different technique than a lot of others. And I'll show people how I do it and why. And then like, they can choose between the methods because at the end of the day, they're going to find what works for them. But I want them to understand the why behind why some things are done. Because, some things that may seem harder when they're watching me, there's a reason that I do it, and then when they realize like, "Oh my gosh, that does make for a cleaner color placement," or whatever it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
and a cleaner result, they're like, "That's not more work, that's saving you, at the end result."
Yeah. It's interesting because, there's people have these perceptions of it can't be that hard or it can't be, it's not that complicated. And I remember the first time that someone taught me to hold a golf club in a certain way. I don't golf really much, but like they taught me to like do this grip and I was like, that's the weirdest thing ever. And they're like, okay, well then like swing. And I'm like, oh, like that makes sense. But I didn't know. I just had this sort of perception of how I was supposed to do it. But even how you hold your scissors or how you lay the hair or how you do the foil, like those are all things that they all matter, right? And so you want to have instructors who are that detail oriented and they're not just kind of going by the books. So that's the first section is really, instructors and how experienced are they? And mostly when you visit a school, and for instance, we'll use Bailey as our example, who's in charge of admissions for the schools that you run. When you would meet with Bailey or one of her people on our team at one of the schools, they want you to come experience the school. They want you to go and talk to the instructors and show you, hey, these instructors care about you and your future. It's not just a job to them. And so that's an expectation that you listening and watching should have, is you should have an expectation when you go to school that that teacher cares about you before you're their student, right? So we'll leave you with that for the instructor piece. And I'll put Bailey's email actually in the show notes because if you're listening to this, if you listen to other episodes and you're like, how do I connect with it? Bailey and her team are the ones that are the part of the admissions and they'll be able to answer all those questions. Nathan, let's talk about something that a lot of people probably don't put a lot of thought into, which is curriculum, having up to date curriculum. So give us all sort of the 10,000-foot view on the curriculum world for cosmetology.
Well, the curriculum world is like, I guess, most of the curriculum world in the US at least is there's a couple main companies that tend to write textbooks and have they have a what's the word? A corner market.
They have a duopoly is what they
Yeah,
have.
monopoly, right? Kind of a
There's
monopoly.
2 there's 2 of them. It's not monopoly, it's a duopoly, but yeah, they have a core curriculum, yeah.
Yeah, and those are the curriculums that, are used for the state exams that you have to take to get licensed in the states,
Gotcha.
things like that. And it is a lot of the general information, anatomy and physiology. It's things you have to know when you're working with human body. It's infection control, how to like make sure you're not cross contaminating your tools because, whether someone has a scalp issue or a nail fungus, you sure don't want to spread that stuff to other guests, right? And a lot of that stuff is tried and true and timeless. I mean, some of the science in there is, but a lot of them don't update the skills that they're putting in the books as far as like the techniques of how to do the hair, right? Whether that's
Right,
a
right.
color technique, cutting technique, skincare, I feel has been rapidly evolving. The types of products used in the nail world are rapidly evolving, and so those aren't always captured in the curriculum. And so you want to make sure you're going to a school that is staying up to speed on what's current now because students want to get out in the real world and they want to offer the latest, greatest because that's what's going to set them apart to their guests. If they're doing the same service that, you know, someone that's been doing hair for 40 years is doing, and especially if that person hasn't changed much, you probably don't have many clients left of, you know, salon age because they're all in retirement homes.
Yeah, and the time the time to learn this stuff is before you have, a client who walks in the door and says, "Can you do this?" Or before you go out and try to find a job and they're like, "Do you do this?" And you're like, no." It is the time to learn not just the foundational skills, but then, to know how to work with the emerging technology in the skincare industry is while you're in school. And so I think, again, it's a reminder. Certainly reach out to Bailey and Nathan's team for his schools, but these are questions you should be asking. What do you do to keep up with trends? So when I graduate in a year or 2 years, I'm I'm going to leave with what I need to meet people where they are in that moment, right?
Yeah,
And I'm
absolutely.
guessing most people just don't know to ask that.
And they don't, you don't know what you don't know, right? And it was, I mean, it was the same for me when I went to school years ago. I knew some basics about what I was going to go to school and learn, but like I didn't realize what I wasn't learning either correctly or, until I got out and realized like, oh, this was a whole bunch of
Mm,
stuff introduced to me yet. And you're not going to master everything in school because it's a short period of time, but you at least need that introduction and that opportunity to know what's happening in the industry so you can be relevant and, know what's relevant to your guests.
absolutely. Absolutely. There was another point about the curriculum that I wanted to mention, which is that you have within your leadership team, you're constantly talking about how can we make the curriculum better because of your industry experience, because you started these from being in the industry. I'm guessing not all schools have that perspective on, how can we make it better and better? What's sort of the average approach to curriculum? Just use those books?
Yeah, the average approach is using those books and they've been teaching the same haircuts that are in those books for the last, who knows, I don't know if it's 40, 50 years or longer.
Yeah.
And, they're not really updating like what are the current types of color trends that are happening? What's the current way to use hair color in an application? You know, again, I talked about skincare rapidly changing. What's the new technology? Because there's a lot of technology in some of these fields that changes rapidly, and if they're just using the old standbys, you're getting antiquated information that's not even going to be useful to you when you get out.
Yeah.
So
You mentioned something to me that I thought was interesting, about, and it would be really fascinating to like ask this at a school and see their reaction as a person looking to go join the school about the how a lot of schools will oversimplify what they teach because they don't get into the nuance of it enough. What was that example you were mentioning?
so yeah, I mean, it's one of the main reasons I started a school years ago. Is I've done a lot in the industry. I've owned salons. I've been behind the chair, with a very successful clientele, which helped fund everything even. But I also educated for other professional product lines. So I would go around and work hair shows for them. I would go teach classes at other salons and schools that carried those, their product line because they wanted to make sure that their customer that carried their hair product used
Mhm.
it right.
Right.
And I would go into some of these schools to teach them hair color, and I just found the amount of misinformation the students was getting was mind-boggling to me. And an example of that is we have different, when you mix hair color, you have two components generally. One is what's going to be your oxidative dye, and the other one is like your hydrogen peroxide or your oxidation product, your oxidizer, excuse me. And everybody, you have usually five different developer strengths, which is that hydrogen peroxide. There's a 5 volume, a 10 volume, a 20, 30, 40. There's a couple color lines that have a 50. Very few of those.
And is that the
Again,
percentage of that you're putting in the mix? Is that
exactly.
okay?
It's
Okay.
it's kind of
So
it's
it
kind of
goes from 5 to 50 is what you're saying.
crap. And
Wow, massive difference.
and I just found so often, and you still see this today, it's instructors know, hey, 20 volume will cover gray coverage, and it's kind of in the middle, so they just mix everything with gray coverage. I mean, with 20 volume. Problem is, that's way too much for some color applications, and it's way too little for others. But because they don't truly understand the science of what that product does and what the use of that is, chemically in the mix, they just misteach it.
Yeah,
And
it's like owning a clothing store and saying, "We carry medium."
yeah,
Okay, well, there's some people that's gonna be really baggy, and there's other people that aren't gonna be able to put that on at all. It just doesn't fit, right? But
100%.
the challenge is, again, if you're looking at getting into the industry or schools, is you don't know until you get there and you're like, and you might not even know till you get out where you're just like, oh, they just told me 20. And the person at the next chair is being like, what are you taught? 20? Like that's twice as much as you should be using on that, or that's half as much as you should be using on that, right?
Exactly.
So these are the nuanced things that you have to make sure the curriculum is up to date, and you need to be asking those questions. And that's what Bailey and her team are there for, is to answer those questions of how do I know that what I'm learning I can use and get a job and be relevant right away.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really important. And also, you have said, you have to remove stuff that's old. You have to make sure that they're not just using that curriculum; they're adding more trends, and also just that the leadership team is dedicated to keeping the curriculum up to date. Those are all really important aspects. The third aspect of your schools that makes them unique is one that it's interesting because you can never put a number on this thing, but you always know if it's good or bad, right? And that's culture. So, what are the things that are unique to your school that you're proud of when it comes to your culture?
I think there's several things. The biggest one to me is, we've never just set out to be like, we've got to be the biggest school with the most enrollments or the most students. It's more about like, we want to make sure that our students have an experience that they can be successful afterwards, that they get the type of attention from their educators that they need so that they can, master the skills and go out and have a successful career. So, one of the things we do is we make sure we have a very strong instructor to student ratio. So you're not part of a class where it's like you're never going to get attention from the instructor or the educator if you need extra help with something, right? That's really a focus of ours. One thing I really love about us too is that we stay pretty active with our alumni, like helping them even after they're out of school. So it's like whether they're looking for work, or we've had so many people come back after a few years experience like, hey, I want to open a salon, what do I need to do? And we're happy, even though we teach that while they're in school, a few years removed, some people don't remember that, or if they took notes they may not have those notes, and so they'll come back and we're more than happy to help them because we truly want to see them succeed. And again, it goes back to the type of people we're trying to staff our schools with, of both administrators and educators, that like, hey, we want to see those students excel and have those aha moments, and you know really have a career at this, not just, hey, let's run students through and run the next batch. So
I think about the literal numbers of if you have a class that's twice as large. I mean, so much of what you're doing in cosmetology is literally hands on.
hmm
That you have to have instructors have to, students need time with instructors to look at what they're doing. So it's, if you have a class that's twice as big because the school wants to be twice as big, but it's the same number of instructors, you have half as much attention to what you're doing. And that could be a problem, right? And I want to ask you about the culture of hard work. This is something that, as I was actually meeting with Bailey the other day, talking about sort of the ideal student who would want to go to your schools, and she said, we really try to make it very clear that this is hard work. And I just wanted to ask you, like, that sounds kind of obvious, but I mean, obviously, there's other places where they don't use time as well. So you kind of speak to the culture of work.
yeah, well, it's funny you bring that up because that's even one of our core values is, strong work ethic. And really what that's about, it's not about just like grinding to the bone, but it's about being productive, right? And like when you're at school, whether you're in a program that requires 400 hours to get your certificate or 1600 hours, you only have a limited number of hours. And if you're just there making sure the clock's ticking on your hours and not actually actively engaged in learning and practicing these techniques, you're going to get finished with those hours, but are you going to actually be prepared to be successful? And so that's one of the things we really want to do too, is make sure that when our students are there, they're actively engaged in learning, they're actively engaged in practicing. Um, it's like, I'm trying to remember the basketball player. It might have been Kobe, but it's like he was going to make 1,000 shots every day, and he
Yeah,
had,
that was Kobe. That was the Mamba mentality. That's
yeah,
what he
and
was
so
famous for. Yeah.
he had, I think it was 15 spots on the floor, and he had that divided by 1,000. So every spot he had to make, I forget how many shots, but crazy, right? And you think that's crazy, but you're like, why was he you know a
Yeah.
generation talent?
Yeah.
It wasn't just talent; it was work ethic. Everybody thinks that's all talent. It's like it's often work ethic more than, trump talent every day.
Yeah, and hard work is hard. Eh, You don't always feel motivated, but I also know that for those listening and watching, there's times when it's like I don't really feel that motivated, but when you go in and there's a culture around you, it does make it easier to work hard. When there's other people around you working hard. The flip side of that is it can actually be more difficult to work hard when you go into a culture where people are just sort of just there. And you're like, no, it's like we've all been part of a project at school and somebody like just didn't care. And it's like that made it harder for those who did care. Right. And so I think that's something else that people really need to pursue is they need to find a place where it's like we're not here to be easy. It's not easy. Right. If your goal is just easy and cheap, don't reach out to Bailey. This is not the right fit for you, right? But if your goal is I want to work hard, let's not make it any harder than we need it to be, but I want to work hard and I want my dollars to be a good investment. I think that that's the right reasons and the right way to go about it. I want to ask about one more thing when it comes to culture, which is that when people and obviously price matters, but a lot of times people will just look at schools and go, how much does that one cost and how much does that one cost? They'll treat it like apples to apples, right? Which is all, it's the same thing. Why is I know you want to be affordable, but why is being the cheapest not your goal as a school?
Because being the cheapest, it's the same as like we're hoping our graduates don't want to go out and be the cheapest hairstylist or esthetician in the market.
Wow.
It's and it's not about like, hey, let's price ourselves the highest because we're trying to be the premier, price point. It's more about like when you're going for the cheapest and you're just price shopping, it's the same as if you're going to like hit the value menu at McDonald's or you want to go to a nice restaurant experience, right? They're different tiers, and we're not a brand that's looking to be like, hey, let's be the value menu. We're wanting to be the brand that's like, let's give them a quality experience because they're going to get better long-term results from that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and I didn't we didn't talk about this beforehand, so apologies in advance, but I think about the way someone could start their career if they're just not well equipped and sort of what they could expect to qualify for versus if someone is well equipped. And you talked about this before, people who come to your schools and before they even graduate, they've already got a job placement, right? So, I mean, could someone make, and that's why I'm asking, 20% more, 30%, 50%, whatever? I mean, more if they come out ready versus they just did the minimum.
Absolutely. And I think 20, 50% is not even in the realm. It's usually they might make 3 to 5 times as much as someone that's unprepared
Wow.
because the person that's unprepared is going to be so much slower to build a clientele,
Mm,
so much slower to be able to know how to be productive in the workplace. Whereas the ones who put in the work and learn the skills necessary, they'll go out and they'll fill up their appointment book quicker and immediately be making, like I said, multiples more than the other stylist or esthetician, etc.
yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. That's an interesting number. And I just think about this as a quick analogy. I like to spend a lot of money on my shoes and my pillows because I'm on my feet
Yep.
or my head's on a pillow, right?
Uh-huh.
And I remember my wife one time she bought this pillow and it was like $90. And I was like, "Babe, why'd you buy $90 pillow?" She's like, "Just lay on it." And I laid on it. I was like, "Okay, now I know why you bought a $90 pillow, right?" Because we buy these crappy $20 pillows every, however year, 2 years, and I've had that good pillow for, I don't know, 15 years. And my point is, it might have cost more,
Hmm.
but the value was there. It was worth 10 times those other ones because it was better. And the idea that you would invest in a school that in the very right out of the gate, you're doubling, you're tripling, you're quadrupling your income versus the other one, unless that other school costs 1/100th, right? You're gonna make more. It's gonna be worth the investment, right? So I appreciate that reminder. That's a pretty eye-opening realization, I think, for people. It's like, yeah, you can get the cheaper one, but it will cost you a lot more.
Yeah, it's ROI, right? Return on investment. It's like, if is your even if you spend more, your return on investment will be so much greater usually that it's gonna be a higher percentage return on investment. I think of like, anybody you see that's really successful, I think in business, they always talk about the first thing you should invest in is yourself and your skills. And once you have those skills at an adequate level that you can bring in a good income, then you can worry about investing in other things. So many people want, I think in America in general, that shortcut of like, hey, where's somewhere I could invest $10,000 and turn it into a million? It's like, well, invest in yourself first. It's not going to, you're not going to find an investment that's going to usually do that unless you hit that once in a million. You know, you bought Amazon when it was brand new and then waited years.
Right, right. Yeah, I love the idea. Invest in yourself. Don't always pursue the cheapest, pursue the best. And so, Nathan, I thank you for that. And again, folks, if you would like to contact Nathan's schools, we'll leave an email address to the right person to reach out to, and she or her team will be in touch with you. So, Nathan, as always, thanks for your time.
Thank you.